If you grew up in the South, you know these dishes. The ones only true old-timers remember. We are counting up 25 forgotten Southern comfort foods, from boozy cakes once reserved for Sunday best to penny-pinching pies, smoky skillet sides, lost church casseroles, and even a few quirky vintage salads. Each dish on this list is a piece of living Southern history, rooted in tradition, ingenuity, and more than a little family lore. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon grease, and a whole lot of know-how that turned simple things into something special. Which lost classic comes first? Let us start our nostalgic journey with number 1. Lane cake. If you ever found a slice on your plate at a family reunion or on Easter Sunday, you know it was something special. Lane cake, born in Alabama when Emma Reelander Lane put her name on the recipe back in 1898. 4 layers of tender cake cradle. A filling that is the stuff of grown-up dreams. Raisins, coconut, and a generous splash of bourbon, all simmered together until rich and heady. It became the pride of Southern tables at weddings and holidays, turning up in tattered recipe cards and whispered kitchen secrets. Even Harper Lee slipped it into the pages of To Kill a Mockingbird, tying the cake to Southern storytelling. Folks say every family has their own version, some with more bourbon, some with less, depending on who was baking and who was watching. Back then, folks didn't need fancy ingredients. They had butter, coconut, and a whole lot of know-how. Remember licking the spoon or sneaking an extra slice? You are in good company. Still make Lane cake for special occasions? Some things are worth bringing back. This might be one of them. Buttermilk pie. If you ever showed up to a church supper with nothing but a carton of eggs and a cup of sugar, you knew you could still make dessert. This pie traces back to English milk pies, but the Southern twist came from tangy buttermilk straight from the churn. That is what turned it into a farmhouse classic. It was often brought to church suppers, family reunions, and potlucks when pantry staples had to do the work. Folks called it a throw-together pie because the recipe was as forgiving as an old friend. Eggs, sugar, a splash of buttermilk, and maybe a dusting of nutmeg if you were feeling fancy. When gardens were bare and pantries were thin, buttermilk pie answered the knock on the door from unexpected company. Back then, people didn't need fancy ingredients. They had butter, a little bacon grease sometimes, and a whole lot of know-how. If you remember scraping the last bit from the pie tin after Sunday dinner, you are part of a long, sweet tradition. Still keep a recipe card tucked in your cookbook? Some things are just too good to forget. This might be one of them. Do you still make this one at your house? Let us know. Charleston Red Rice. If you've ever been to a low-country picnic or a Sunday dinner along the Carolina coast, you know this dish means more than just supper. It's a taste of history. Born from the hands of Gullah Geechee cooks, Charleston Red Rice carries the memory of West African jollof rice, brought over by enslaved ancestors and transformed with local tomatoes, bell peppers, and smoked sausage. Every family had their own secret blend of spices, often guarded like gold, and passed down on slips of paper tucked in church cookbooks. At gatherings, a big pot of red rice signaled celebration, its vibrant color and smoky aroma drifting out over the marshes. Folks still remember the sound of rice rattling in the pot and the sizzle of sausage, a promise that something good was coming. Some say the best part was always the crispy edges scraped from the bottom, if you managed to get to them first. Still make Charleston Red Rice for your family? Maybe it's time to bring back a bowl of Southern heritage, she crab soup. If you ever tasted this creamy bowl in a Charleston dining room, you remember that warm, briny elegance that stops you for a moment. Back in 1909, Chef William Deese was asked to impress President Taft during a visit to Charleston. His answer was a rich, velvety soup made from local blue crab, finished with a secret flourish: the orange roe from female crabs. That roe gives she crab soup its rosy color and unmistakable depth. a touch of luxury that turned the dish into a low-country signature. For decades it graced wedding banquets, hotel menus, and springtime suppers, and the debate over roe or no roe could get as heated as a July afternoon. These days, people still argue whether harvesting the roe is fair to the crabs, but the memory of that first spoonful, warm, briny, and elegant, lingers. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon grease, and a whole lot of know-how. Still make this at your house? Let us know. Some traditions are worth bringing back. This dish might be one of them. Tomato corn pie. If you ever watched a summer garden spill over with fat red tomatoes and sweet corn, you know the smell of this pie before it even hits the table. Summer. Back in the 1950s, newspaper columns ran arguments. Should you use fresh corn and homegrown tomatoes, or reach for a can of creamed corn and call it a day? Some swore by sun-warmed produce, while others let mid-century ads talk them into shortcut crusts and pantry hacks. 1950s. Either way, this savory bake brought together the best of the garden and the cupboard, layered with cheese and a buttery crust that could win over even the most stubborn tomato skeptic. Family reunions and Sunday suppers saw more than one debate over what counted as real tomato corn pie, sometimes with a wink, always with a second helping. Buttery crust. Still baking yours from scratch, or do you keep a can or two just in case? However you slice it, this pie is pure southern summer, one bite at a time. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Custard pie. If you ever sat at a folding table under oak trees at a church dinner on the grounds, you might remember a slice of this gentle, wobbly pie waiting by the sheet cakes and banana pudding. It comes from Old English milk pies, and in the rural South it became a mark of thrift and comfort. Just eggs, milk, sugar, and a pinch of salt, whisked together and poured into a plain crust. People would say you would know it was done if it gave a little jiggle in the center, not a crack in sight. During hard times when fruit was too dear and gardens were bare, this pie still made an appearance at every gathering, a quiet promise that sweet things did not need to be fancy. WPA oral histories recall church cooks baking pans of custard pie for homecomings and funerals, each one a small act of care. Try the wobble test yourself sometime. Some desserts are simple on purpose, and all the better for it. Pear salad. If you ever walked into a church basement in the 1950s and spotted a plate of glistening pear halves topped with a dollop of mayonnaise, a sprinkle of sharp cheddar, and a bright red maraschino cherry, you knew you had found the ladies' luncheon table. Community cookbooks helped make it a staple. Pear salad appeared in cookbooks between the 1940s and the 1960s, right alongside recipes for tomato aspic and congealed salads. It was a favorite at baby showers, bridge clubs, and any gathering where a little flair was called for, even if the fruit came from a can. Sweet memories and a little puzzlement go hand in hand with this dish. Equal parts sweet and savory, and let us be honest, a touch odd to anyone not raised on Southern potlucks. Folks used to joke you could spot a real Southern spread by the wobbly towers of pear salad lining the buffet. Maybe you remember the tang of mayonnaise mixing with pear syrup, or the way a maraschino cherry made everything feel a little fancy. Some things are too quirky and too memorable not to love. Bring back a dish like this, and you bring back a memory. Vinegar pie. If you ever sat at your grandmother's table during the lean years, you remember the tang of this humble slice. Born out of the Great Depression, vinegar pie was what folks made when lemons were too expensive and fresh fruit was scarce. A splash of cider vinegar stood in for citrus, giving the pie its signature tartness, while sugar, eggs, and a bit of butter turned pantry scraps into something worth savoring. WPA oral histories tell of cooks who measured every spoonful with care, stretching what little they had into a treat for the whole family. Children called it a special dessert for hard times, and grandmothers swore by the recipe. Proof that a little ingenuity could turn almost nothing into something sweet. No fancy ingredients, just what was on hand and a whole lot of hope. Bacon crackers. If you ever walked into a bridge club or a tailgate party in the 1950s, you might remember a plate piled high with these salty little wonders. The recipe was wonderfully simple. Take a sleeve of saltine crackers, wrap each cracker with a strip of bacon, and bake until everything turns golden and crisp. These little bites were a fixture at church suppers, potlucks, and family gatherings. No fancy dips or store-bought snacks could compete with that smoky crunch, especially when the bacon fat soaked right into the cracker. Back then, folks did not need a specialty shop for snacks. They had a box of crackers, some bacon from the icebox, and a hot oven. These were the party bites that disappeared faster than you could set them down, leaving only crumbs and a lot of happy chatter. Today they have all but vanished, crowded out by chips and bagged munchies. But the memory of bacon crackers still brings a grin to anyone who remembers sneaking an extra off the serving tray. Still make these at your house? Let us know. Some flavors are just too good to let go. Deviled ham. If you ever opened a lunchbox and spotted that little white can with the red devil, you knew what was coming. A tangy pink spread that turned plain white bread into something memorable. The Underwood Company patented their deviled ham in 1870, and by the 1950s, that mischievous devil was a fixture in Southern pantries and picnic baskets. It was the sort of thing you found at church suppers, family reunions, and school field trips. Folks loved the convenience. Pop the top, spread it thick, and lunch was ready before the noon whistle blew. Generations traded sandwiches at the fishing hole and on the back porch. Sometimes a squirt of yellow mustard or a slice of pickle made it feel fancy. And yes, some of us admit to sneaking a spoonful straight from the can. No shame there. By the 1980s, cholesterol warnings and new school lunch rules nudged deviled ham aside for turkey slices and carrot sticks. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Some snacks just refuse to behave or be forgotten. Chapter 11. Southern-Style Pickled Shrimp. If you ever found yourself at a summer garden party along the coast, you might remember the cool bite of shrimp pulled straight from a cut glass bowl, tangy and bright from the brine. Pickling was the clever answer before refrigerators made their way into every kitchen. Coastal cooks simmered the shrimp, then layered them with thin slices of lemon, sweet onion, and a handful of fresh herbs, all covered in a sharp vinegar marinade. After a night in the icebox, or, if you go back far enough, a cool cellar, those shrimp turned into the star of every social spread. Folks served them chilled, often with toothpicks or tiny forks, and you could count on the bowl to empty out before the lemonade did. Some called it highbrow, but the shrimpers knew it was simply good sense dressed up for company. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Some recipes are proof that a little ingenuity and a lot of local flavor never go out of style. Chicken bog. If you ever stood beside a steaming pot at a peaty gathering, you know the smell of chicken and sausage coming together with rice means supper is on. This dish has been feeding crowds in northeastern South Carolina for generations, always with a little extra pride in every spoonful. Folks in Horry County call themselves the chicken bog capital of the world, and they have the festivals to prove it. The name comes from the dish's signature texture. Rice cooked just wet enough to be boggy, not soupy, but not dry either. Tradition says you start with a whole chicken, smoked sausage, onion, and plenty of black pepper, all simmered in a big pot until the flavors meld and the chicken falls apart. Local legend still talks about the 1953 Loris Tobacco Festival, when cooks argued over whose bog was the real deal. Smoked sausage or not, more rice or less, and every family sure their way was best. These days, the rivalry continues at the annual bog off, but the real winner is anyone who gets a bowl. Remember waiting in line for a taste or maybe sneaking an extra helping when no one was looking? Some recipes are more than just food. They are a reason for folks to come together. Still serve chicken bog at your reunions? Maybe it is time to bring a pot back to the table. Let us know. Bacon fried corn. If you ever wandered into a summer kitchen just as the corn came in from the fields, you remember the sizzle and the smell before you even saw the skillet. That first puff of steam, that bacon crackle. This humble side grew out of garden abundance and Depression-era thrift. Fresh corn cut from the cob went straight into a hot pan lined with bacon fat saved from breakfast. It was a staple at church suppers, family reunions, and Sunday dinners. Simple ingredients stretched into something comforting. A handful of green onions, a pinch of black pepper, and minutes later the kernels turned golden and rich. It was the pan that told you the harvest was generous, everyone reaching for a spoon, everyone passing a plate. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had bacon grease, a good skillet, and common sense. And yes, some of us remember scraping the brown bits with a biscuit when nobody was watching. Still fry corn this way when the harvest comes in? Some flavors are worth remembering, so they smell like home. Let us know. Chicken and dumplings. If you ever watched a small hen stretch to feed a table full of family on a Sunday afternoon, you know the magic of this dish. In southern kitchens, even the scrawniest chicken could become the centerpiece, boiled until tender, then crowned with clouds of dumplings, either fluffy drop biscuits or rolled strips, depending on whose grandmother you asked. The pot would bubble away most of the day, filling the house with a promise you could taste before you sat down. For many, chicken and dumplings was not just supper. It was a way to turn little into plenty, to make everyone feel welcome, whether you had 2 guests or 20. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had good soup bones, butter, and a whole lot of know-how. These days, Southern chefs are putting chicken and dumplings back on the menu, hoping to spark old memories. Some diners have been moved to tears by that first bite, the taste taking them straight back to their mother's table. Do you still make this one at your house? Let us know. Some comforts never go out of style. Mississippi mud potatoes. If your memory drifts back to a long table at a family reunion in the 1970s, you can almost see the casserole dishes lined up, steam rising and cheese bubbling at the edges, cheese melting into every corner. This savory cousin to Mississippi mud pie is all about layers, tender sliced potatoes, smoky bacon, and a blanket of melted cheddar tucked into a creamy sauce. It earned its playful name because, like the muddy banks of the Mississippi, it is rich, comforting, and a little bit messy. Church suppers, homecomings, and funeral luncheons often featured a pan or two of this casserole. Bacon makes a persuasive case. People remember scraping the dish clean before the preacher finished his blessing. That was the unofficial sign of success. Church cookbooks from the 1960s and the 1970s are full of handwritten notes about adding more bacon or sneaking in an extra handful of cheese. Folks used to joke that if you showed up late, all you would find was a spoon and a smudge of cheese on the pan. Mess and all, everyone went back for seconds. Still bring Mississippi mud potatoes to your gatherings, or has this casserole faded from your table? Some recipes are worth a little mess and a lot of memories. Bring it back, or tell us your story. Texas corn succotash. If you ever sat down to supper in an old farmhouse near the Red River, you might remember a dish that brought together the best of every garden row. Long before casseroles took over the Sunday table, this was a celebration of what native cooks and African hands coaxed from the land. Sweet corn, tender field peas or lima beans, a scatter of peppers, and if you were lucky, a ribbon of country ham or a splash of cream. It moved west with settlers and ranch hands, picking up smoky, savory notes along the way. It showed up at church suppers and family reunions, the kind of dish that fed a crowd and kept conversation going. Generations learned to tend the garden so there would be enough corn to share at the table. Some say the secret is the skillet. Cook it slow, stir often, and let every kernel soak up the smoky goodness. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon drippings, and a whole lot of know-how. These days, heritage restaurants are putting it back on the menu, hoping to spark a memory or two. Still make this one at your house? Maybe it is time to bring a little Texas back to your table. Pork chops with tomato and green onion relish. If you ever stood by the grill on a sticky July evening, you remember how a simple pork chop could become the star of the backyard. In summers past, when the tomato vines were heavy and the onions came up in bunches, cooks who knew how to stretch $1 brightened budget pork with a fresh relish served at family reunions and church suppers. This was home cooking, not haute cuisine. Thrifty. The relish was just chopped tomatoes, green onions, a splash of vinegar, and maybe a pinch of sugar, mixed while the chops sizzled, simple, fresh, and full of summer. Relish. Folks would slap those chops on the grill or in a hot skillet, spoon that garden relish right on top, and let the juices soak in. Neighbors remember screen doors slamming and the smell of pork drifting down the block, drawing kids and grown-ups alike. Back then, people did not need fancy ingredients. They had tomatoes, green onions, a little fat for flavor, and a whole lot of know-how. Still make pork chops this way when tomatoes come in? Some things are worth bringing back. This dish might be one of them. Let us know. Slow cooker rump roast. If you ever came home from church to the smell of beef drifting through the house, you know the comfort this dish brings. Back in the heyday of the crock pot, when working moms needed a meal that could cook itself while they were out, rump roast became the hero of Sunday suppers. The cut itself was nothing fancy, just a thrifty piece of beef that turned tender and rich after hours of slow heat. Folks would toss it in before sunrise, maybe with carrots, onions, and a splash of Worcestershire. Then let the slow cooker work its magic. By dinner time, the meat would fall apart at the touch of a fork, and the gravy begged for a slice of white bread or a scoop of mashed potatoes. Some say the best part was that first whiff when you open the door. No restaurant could match it. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon grease, and a whole lot of know-how. Some comforts are worth the wait, especially when they fill the whole house with memories. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Chapter 19. Corned beef. Hash casserole. If you ever found yourself staring at a pantry shelf during wartime or during Lent, you probably remember this dish. Pantry. Born out of necessity when fresh meat was scarce and the budget was tight, canned corned beef became a kitchen hero. Southern cooks would stretch a single can with diced potatoes, onions, and sometimes a handful of whatever vegetables were left, turning humble ingredients into a hearty casserole that could feed a crowd. Necessity. During the 1940s and the 1950s, this casserole made regular appearances on Lenten menus when families skipped fresh meat but still needed something filling on the table. Folks remember scraping the last bits from the baking dish, grateful for a meal that made the most of what was on hand. Some say the secret was a crunchy topping of cracker crumbs or a dash of hot sauce, just enough to wake up the taste buds. Thrift. Ever pull together dinner from the pantry and feel a little proud? Corned beef hash casserole is proof that thrift and know-how can make even a can of meat something worth remembering. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Chicken cobbler with biscuit topping. If you ever walked into a homecoming supper and spotted a bubbling casserole crowned with golden biscuits, you remember the hush as plates were passed around. This isn't your everyday chicken pie. This is comfort with a twist. Instead of a rolled crust, cooks dropped spoonfuls of biscuit dough right on top of creamy chicken and vegetables, and the biscuits baked fluffy and brown while soaking in the savory juices below. The biscuit-topped bake grew out of lean times when stretching a little chicken with a handful of flour meant everyone could have a hearty scoop. Served at church suppers, family reunions, and Sunday dinners, these casseroles disappeared fast. For many families, it became a ritual, grandparents teaching grandchildren how to spoon the dough, and everyone hoping for that corner piece where biscuit met sauce. There is a quiet joy in breaking through that biscuit lid, steam rising, and finding a taste of home beneath. Back then, folks didn't need fancy ingredients. They had butter, a pantry, and a whole lot of know-how. Some say the secret was the drop biscuits, never rolled, just spooned on with a generous hand. Still make chicken cobbler for your family gatherings, or is it time to bring back this biscuit-rich classic? Let us know. Cowboy Cornbread Casserole. If you ever came home after a long day and smelled something hearty baking in the oven, you remember that kind of comfort. Picture the dish name on a worn recipe card with vintage linens and the kind of light that makes the kitchen feel like home. The name might conjure cattle drives and dusty boots, but real chuck wagon cooks kept things simpler with beans, bacon, and hoe cakes over the fire. This casserole, as we know it, was born in southern kitchens when boxed cornbread mixes and canned soup found a permanent spot in the pantry. Home cooks layered seasoned ground beef or sausage on the bottom, poured in sweet corn, and topped it with a thick blanket of cornbread batter. It was portable enough for field hands, filling enough for a crowd, and forgiving for anyone working with whatever was left in the icebox. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon grease, and a whole lot of know-how. Some say the best part is the crispy edge where cornbread meets the pan, if you managed to snag a corner piece before the rest disappeared. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Skillet Stroganoff Pie. If you ever saw a casserole dish crowned with golden biscuit dough and bubbling with creamy sauce, you might remember this one. Stroganoff pie, a taste of shortcut suppers and Sunday tables. In the 1960s and the 1970s, Southern kitchens were swept up in a wave of convenience thanks to companies like Campbell's and Pillsbury. Their magazine ads and mail and recipe booklets promised busy homemakers a taste of homemade comfort without all the fuss. Cream of mushroom soup became the backbone of 1,000 casseroles, and refrigerated dough made it easy to top anything with a buttery crust. Historically, skillet stroganoff pie married ground beef browned in a skillet with canned soup and a dollop of sour cream. It was finished with a layer of biscuit dough and baked until golden. The dish became the poster child for quick, feed-a-crowd cooking. Emotionally, this pie brings up family tables full of friendly argument. Was it really stroganoff if it started with a can? Some cooks swore by the shortcut, while others wrote letters to the editor lamenting the loss of scratch-made tradition. Either way, those quick pies fed a lot of hungry mouths and left room for stories and laughter. There is a wink in the memory. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon grease, and a whole lot of know-how. Still keep a can of soup in the pantry for emergencies. Or do you roll your own dough? Some things are worth bringing back. This dish might be one of them. Chapter 23. Roast pork with apples. If you ever woke up to the smell of pork roasting on a crisp autumn Sunday, you know this dish means more than just supper. It is a memory wrapped in warmth. In Appalachian kitchens, pork and apples were a match made by the seasons and by history. British and German immigrants brought the pairing across the Atlantic, and it settled deep into mountain tradition when the apple harvest rolled around. The ritual was simple but sacred. A pork shoulder or loin tucked into a roasting pan with thick apple slices, maybe a scattering of onions or a splash of cider, then left to slow roast until the house filled with sweet and savory promise. Some folks remember gathering in the kitchen, waiting for the moment when the roast was carved and juices ran over the apples, everyone hoping for an end piece. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, a jar of cider, and a whole lot of know-how. Still make this at your house when the leaves turn? Some flavors carry the comfort of 100 autumns. Every slice is a story worth keeping. Let us know. Chapter 24. Chicken and Corn Chowder. Chicken and corn chowder. If you ever wrapped your hands around a steaming bowl on the first cold night of fall, you remember. This humble chowder comes from Southern home kitchens and church suppers, born of Depression-era thrift when a little chicken and a few ears of corn had to stretch to feed a family. Simple ingredients: shredded chicken, sweet corn, milk, and a handful of potatoes or whatever vegetables were left in the crisper. Some cooks added a touch of bacon or green onion for extra flavor, but the heart of the dish was always its thrift and warmth. Folks remember the gentle bubble of the pot on the stove, the scent drifting through the house, and the way a bowl of chowder could make even the chilliest evening feel like home. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had butter, bacon fat, and a whole lot of know-how. Still make this one at your house? Let us know. Some things are worth bringing back. This chowder might be one of them. Cranberry Fluff Salad. Cranberry fluff. If you ever scooped a spoonful of this pink pillowy treat onto your plate at Christmas or Thanksgiving, you knew the holidays had officially begun. Born in the 1950s, when whipped topping and mini marshmallows took over Southern kitchens, this dish found its place on church supper tables and family reunion buffets. It became a potluck favorite, easy, cheerful, and a little bit modern for its day. The recipe was pure fun: tart cranberries chopped fine, sweet canned pineapple folded in, a handful of marshmallows, and clouds of whipped topping stirred until everything turned rosy and light. Some folks added pecans for crunch. Others swore by extra marshmallows for that perfect jiggle. Kids loved it for the color and candy-like sweetness. Grown-ups loved that it counted as a salad in name if not in spirit. Back then, folks did not need fancy ingredients. They had whipped topping, marshmallows, and a whole lot of holiday cheer. Still whip this up for your own celebrations? Some dishes just make the season brighter, one fluffy bite at a time. Tell us if you still serve it. Across all 25 forgotten Southern comfort foods, one pattern stands out. Each dish is a recipe for resilience, born from making much with little and sharing it with many. Even as tastes change, these traditions quietly shape kitchens today, reminding us that comfort is less about ingredients and more about community. Southern food endures because it is memory you can taste.